You have a brain tumor. Those are 5 words that nobody on this earth ever wants to hear. But unfortunately, on this earth, there are people like me and others who have been diagnosed before with a brain tumor. And so today I want to share my story of how I found out that I had a brain tumor. And my hopes are to help somebody else out there who is struggling and having symptoms and they don't really know what's going on. And maybe this will help you. Or if you've been diagnosed with a brain tumor, you can know that you are not alone. So before I get started on the brain tumor story, I want to go ahead and give you a background of my other health conditions so that you will see the whole picture here. So I also have a condition known as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I have the type 3 hypermobility. So Ehlers-Danlos, we also call it EDS. It is a syndrome that you would have since birth, and it's genetic. So it affects your connective tissues. You might have hypermobile joints or joints that go out of place, stretchy skin, and some other things that go with that. I also have something called POTS, and it stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. That's the long one. But POTS is basically a thing where you have trouble standing up. Your blood pressure can go high, like mine. I have hyperPOTS. So your blood pressure can go really high or really low, and you can pass out. You also have something called tachycardia, where your heart races, or you can have tachybrady, like I have, where you have bradycardia and your heart goes low, and tachycardia and your heart rate goes high. And so it's basically a disorder of the autonomic nervous system, and your body just doesn't regulate your blood pressure and your pulse, and it goes haywire. And so third, I have another condition called Mast Cell Activation Syndrome. And you're probably thinking, what in the world is that? Well, it was recently discovered in about 2008 by a Dr. Lawrence Afrin. And he also wrote a wonderful book, Never Bet Against Occam. In the year 2016, he wrote this. And so it's got lots of details about mast cell if you have the same issues as me. Okay, so what is mast cell? Well, I was really amazed to find out that if you have a glioblastoma brain tumor or an astrocytoma brain tumor, they are full of mast cells. Yeah, and they don't really know why. So I find that interesting. But anyway, if you have the Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, this is your symptoms. For me, I have had hives and rashes and allergies my whole life. Some of my common triggers are medications, soaps, fragrances. I made my own soap. I still make my own soap because I cannot tolerate anything that's store-bought. Also foods, spices, and here lately it's been spinach. Spinach does not like me. Some people go into anaphylaxis or their throats close up. They may have asthma or other troubles from mast cell. And so those 3 things, Ehlers-Danlos hypermobility, POTS, and Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, are what some of us call the trifecta. It's 3 different syndromes, but they all go together. So they haven't really found the gene for this yet, but Dr. Lawrence Afrin says it's probably caused possibly by something on the KIT gene, K-I-T. Who knows? I guess the future will tell us. Okay, so now I'm ready to move on to my brain tumor story. First of all, a lot of people have no symptoms before they find out they have a brain tumor. And so they would go in for an MRI because of an accident or whatever, and it just shows up on the scan. Other people have migraines with flashing lights and aura. I have basically had migraines since I was a teenager, and I do not think that my migraines were related to my brain tumor. I think it was from my other issues. Okay, so I first went to see my neurologist in 2019, and she ordered an MRI because of my debilitating migraines. And so on this MRI, it said it was normal, and it said I had something called an enlarged perivascular space, which is basically like this spot. I'll put a picture of my MRI up here for you to look at. Okay, so during this whole time, when I thought I had a normal brain, I was having some weird symptoms, and let me go through my list of symptoms. I think these are important. I think the earliest symptom I probably had was several years earlier, and it was nausea. I would get nauseated every day after lunch, and I didn't really know why. And so I thought maybe it's something I'm eating. I mean, because I have so many different issues. I would get the headaches. I also had a lot of confusion and short-term memory loss. Like things would happen, and I wouldn't remember it at all. One weird thing I did one time was I went to the post office and I was getting out to ship some packages and noticed I had forgotten to put on shoes. And so that was a weird one. Also, I would take like eggs and unknowingly put them in the freezer, and I would find them later and they would all be frozen. And I never remembered it. I would have like extreme burst of impending doom, like something bad's gonna happen, you know, really bad anxiety, break out in sweat and shake all over. And I'm like, I can't even drive or do anything. I didn't know what that was. I also had deja vu and twitching fingers. They would start twitching. So my symptoms just kept getting worse and worse. And my weird spells that I was having would come upon me and I would almost lose consciousness. And I could not understand speech. Strange. But my husband would be talking, and it was kind of like a Charlie Brown episode. Wah, 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 wah. And he'd get mad because he's like talking to me, and I have no idea what he's saying. I can hear him, but my brain was not translating it. One time I was at my parents', and I had over a dozen of these weird spells, and it was getting on my last nerve, and I had no idea what it was. And so when we got home, I got on my phone and I Googled, why am I having deja vu and different things? And then I found out the problem. I did not know. I thought when you have a seizure that you fall out on the floor and, you know, convulse. Well, some seizures are not like that. They're called partial seizures. And so you have some of the different symptoms that I had, especially the deja vu with partial seizures. So, with this new information, I went back to my neurologist and explained everything, and she said, okay, you cannot drive anymore because when you have seizures in the state of Tennessee where I live, you're not supposed to drive for 6 months after a seizure to make sure that you're seizure free and that you don't injure anyone. And so at that point, she sent me for an EEG, and I had that done. And she also told me to take a low dose of Keppra, which is an anti-seizure medication. And I think it's the first medication they usually start you out with. After the EEG I had run, my results were normal from the EEG, which is where they put these little sticky things all over your head and flashlights and make you breathe heavy. My results were normal, and I got into the car. My mother was driving because at this point, you know, I wasn't allowed to drive. And she started out of the parking garage down the road. And my dad, I called him on the phone to tell him, you know, we were leaving. And I immediately started having strange sensations again. And I couldn't quite understand what he said. My heart started racing to about 115 beats a minute or something, the tachycardia. Although when people do have seizures, they can get tachycardia. In fact, there's an app that you can get for your Apple Watch that tells you if you're having a seizure, it checks for the tachycardia. So I'm not sure what this spell was, but anyway, had tachycardia, chest pain, couldn't breathe, was conscious the whole time. So my mom took me to another hospital on her way home, dropped me off at the ER. And the weird thing was I went limp, and so I'm just kind of hanging there. And the guy behind the counter was like, what's your name, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of got smart with me. I think he thought I was a druggie or whatever. I didn't take any drugs at that time. And I was not even taking the Keppra that was prescribed me. Although she had told me to take the Keppra, I did not. Okay, so with this ER experience, I went in, they did some chest x-rays, run some blood work. My metabolic panel was off. So my diagnosis was dehydration, which is not uncommon in POTS people. We get weird things that happen to us like low potassium, magnesium, low salt. So I thought, well, I'm just dehydrated, you know, no big deal. So I went home, Mom took me home. They couldn't even get the IV in my vein. I went home, ate some chips, drank a lot of water, and my pulse was getting up to about 220 when I would stand up. It was just a bad flare, I guess, of POTS. I don't know if it was related to the brain tumor or not. Okay, so I carried on with life, and my POTS situation stayed about the same. And my partial seizures, they came and went. They were not prevalent. They were just kind of intermittent. And I noticed that magnesium citrate really helped me with the seizure situation. And so I started taking magnesium citrate every day until my mother told me that they caused her to have heart arrhythmias. And so I thought I'll just quit it. And so I quit taking the magnesium. Mistake. And so about 3 days after I quit the magnesium, I was going to a rheumatologist appointment, and my mom was driving me again. Bless her heart. And we were in Chattanooga, and it was February 25th of 2020. And I noticed that morning I didn't feel good. And so we were driving down the road, started getting the tachycardia really high. And it's different when you have seizures. It just wells up and your fingers start twitching. And so she's talking, the deja vu hits, and I knew what was happening. And I didn't tell her. And so she drives down to the road. We go to the rheumatologist appointment. We leave. And then I start getting nauseated. I was like, pull over and get me some Cheetos and Gatorade, and I'll eat that. You know, it's probably just POTS, and I'll get over this. So on the way home, same place, which, by the way, seizures can be triggered by flashing light in a car. That was a lot of my triggers. So we got back in the car and traveled toward the same hospital again. And this time I did not have a partial seizure. My mom said, I don't know how you didn't choke. I went completely out convulsing. I had a grand mal seizure, or a tonic-clonic seizure is what they call them now, I think. I don't remember anything, but she said I was flailing around and jerking and making weird noises with my voice, like a groaning sound, and drooling everywhere. And so we'd already been to the ER before, so she drove me back over there. I remember none of it. They wheeled me in somehow, I guess, and put some IVs in and started me on some medication to help me stop seizure. And it lasted over 5 minutes, she said, because we had to travel down the interstate and she had to take me to the ER. The first thing I remember waking up, they were giving me all that medication, and the guy looks at me like with this scared look. He's like, that is not a perivascular space in your brain. It's a brain tumor. And so I was on so many drugs, the Keppra and the Valium and whatever they give you. Who knows? And I'm like looking at him, and I was having an aura because they're pumping all this stuff in me. An aura was like the lights flashing. And I'm looking at him, and I was like, and immediately I think he needs a better presentation. He looks scared. You know, it didn't click in my brain that this was not good. But anyway, that's when I first found out this was not a perivascular space filled with fluid. It was a brain tumor. So to make a long story short, I stayed in the hospital for about 3 or 4 days and had another MRI run. And on the last day at the hospital, a neurosurgeon came by and he spoke to me. He said that it did not look like it was fluid, like it looked solid, like a brain tumor. And to find out what kind of brain tumor and to get surgery on it, they just wanted to send me to Vanderbilt, which is a hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. And so I was referred at that time to Vanderbilt. And that is how I found out that I had a brain tumor. And I will do another video sometime on my craniotomy. So in conclusion, know that it may take more than one MRI to find a brain tumor. Not all radiologists read them the same way. My first MRI was done at a different hospital, and to that person, it looked like a perivascular space that was enlarged. And then at the other hospitals, they decided that it was a different prognosis, a brain tumor. So if you have any of my symptoms like the deja vu, the shaking, the migraines, any of that, make sure that you see a neurologist and get an MRI as soon as possible. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps somebody. God bless.